Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted. I appreciate that. I also love it if you leave comments, so leave a comment. I've been doing a lot of projects lately that were relatively advanced, so I thought today we could do something a little more basic for some beginners. So if you've already done a few bezels and you want to continue to practice that, and you want to make some rings with some stones bezel set, then these three designs might be good options. There's a lot of variations that you could do. They all have a single bezel set stone, and I did cabochons for all of these since it's intended to be a beginner sort of video. For years I've taught beginning silversmithing in-person classes, and these were some of the ones that I provided as good choices for first rings with a stone. So we'll do these three different ones. I picked out some stones. I have I think I grabbed a larimar and a turquoise, Kingman turquoise, and a blue aquamarine cab. So we'll use those ones for the stones. Before we get started, I need to thank some groups of people. First and foremost, my patrons, who are my primary supporters. I really appreciate not only the financial contributions, but also the positive energy that you all provide over on my Patreon site. I love seeing the cool stuff that you make, and I really appreciate all of the good advice I've received. I hope you're getting as much out of it as I am. The other group is my YouTube subscribers. Thank you all for signing up. I just passed 9,400. We're getting close to 9,500. Or no, I just passed 9,500, I think. So soon to be 10,000, hopefully. That's amazing, and I can't believe that sometimes when I look at the numbers, but thank you so much for signing up. And thanks for all of the nice comments and the financial contributions, like the buying me a coffee. That really helps with supplies and stuff, so I really appreciate that. Or when you buy some merch. All of that stuff is helpful for me and helps me to continue doing this. So thank you for that. All right, let's get started on these three rings. Here's a couple of my design idea books. There's a new one that my wife just put up. There's actually two new ones my wife just put up with different designs on the cover. So if you're interested in that, check out the merch store. The one I'm currently using is this one, and let me show you what I drew up for these. I love the little graph thing in the background here because that really helps me to keep things sort of lined up and symmetrical. I went ahead and made bezels for these in advance because it's a 3-project video, and one of them I did open back because it's an aquamarine. So here's the aquamarine right here. Come here. So that'll be for this one. This is a little Kingman turquoise. And then here's a piece of larimar. So those will go with those. If you're interested in seeing how to do those kinds of bezels, I'll put a link up here for you. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to make the bands for these and put them all together and then show you the final product. But here's the different styles. There's a couple of other ones that I've used for beginners in the past as well, including the one that I did, which is called I think we called it a gap ring because it has a little gap in the middle and it's got kind of a swirl on either side. I did a prong set faceted stone in that one, but that looks just as good, I think. Well, I don't know. It looks pretty good also with a bezel set cabochon, so I'll put a link up there to that one if you want to see that one. That also is relatively, the band part is pretty beginner, so yeah, but we're going to do these three today. The first one is going to be one where the bezel is contained in between two pieces of wire. You can use either 14 gauge round or 14 gauge square, and then it leaves you the opportunity to put some decorations in the space between where the wire is rejoined down here, and so that's a nice, relatively easy one to do. This one has a lot of variations. I mean, so does this one because you can put a lot of different decorations here. I've put silver balls, circles, zigzag. I'll probably do zigzags on this one. I've done some little peace signs. I've done people's initials. There's a lot of different things you could put in there. And sometimes I just leave them plain because people seem to like those too. This one, it's two wires soldered together in the middle that split on either end. and then you attach them to the bezel in 4 spots. And again, there's a lot of variations possible here. You don't have to attach them just like this. You can attach them, you can tilt them in different directions. You could spread them out and have them join up here on the sides. There's a lot of different possibilities for this one. I've done a million different styles of this. You could also change the orientation of the stone if you wanted to, since I'm doing an oval this way. And the final one is just a simple bypass ring, and I think I'm going to use 8 gauge half round for the sides here. And this is another pretty simple one. We're just going to place a bezel set stone in between those 2 sides, and that makes for a nice looking ring. So some variations on this. You could do the stone in a different orientation, or you could use different materials for this. Instead of half round, you could use some square wire or some round wire. You could make it more delicate or bolder. You could tilt this more this way so it's not quite as angled out like that. There's a lot of different things you can do with those too. But let's start with this one, and I think I'm going to use square wire for this one to start with. So I usually have people, since I'm usually doing this one in a class, you could calculate the exact amount you need for a particular size. But since I'm usually doing a group of people, I'll have them make it a little bit big. So like cut 2 pieces about, what is that, 3.5 inches. Pretty close. 3.5-ish, which is 90 millimeters, 9 centimeters ish. So let's cut 2 of those. If I'm doing a big group of people, they're all doing different sizes. That's why I just have them cut them big, and then we'll size it down when it gets to be that time. Like I said, you could just from the get-go figure out exactly how long of a piece you needed if you wanted to. It's always going to be longer than what you think, because when you spread this out this way, it's going to reduce the length this way a little bit. So my first step is going to be straightening these out. I find when you're straightening wire out, if you use these flat nose pliers and just hold it, the pliers, and then use your fingers to bend it where it needs to be bent, you're just using the pliers for good leverage, basically. Square wire, you get it straight in one dimension, then you turn it sideways, and it'll be crooked in the other dimension. So you have to kind of keep going back and forth until it's straight. See, now it's still curved this way. I'm going to get these to be about the same length so I can find the center of both of them. It's pretty close. Should be about right there, I think. I'm going to double check if we take one of these and flip it around. Line the ends up, it should be pretty close to the center still. I think that's pretty good. We need to figure out how far down this is going to come back together. And I'd say for this one, because of the size of the stone, it's a pretty good sized stone. I don't know how much, maybe 7 millimeters. You can see it's going to be from the point where we bent that. This is going to be where the center point is, right there. It's like 20 millimeters or so to either side. So the easiest way to get them symmetrical would be to get those lined up. About 2 centimeters. Flip it around again, line up the center. Should be able to just extend those lines across. Like that. And that's where we'll make our bends. I usually, when I'm bending these, I'll put the mark right off to the side of the edge of the pliers so that I can just go like that. And then we'll do the same on this one, the opposite direction. that. And if you line up these, the points that we did outside of the center here, these ones, that's where those are going to come back together. Line it up like that. So this is a little bit wider than that, so I'm going to bend them just slightly more. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I want to get it relatively close. After they're soldered together, we can adjust them. We also might want to see how close we got to the angles. So I have this one a little more steeply bent than this one, so let's see if we can get this a little closer to that. That's pretty close. Now let's see where they overlap and line those up. That's a little closer to what I was thinking. You can see where I'm right here putting those two ends together. That gives me about the right gap. Now I have to bend these other ones back in the opposite direction, and I almost always overbend these just because this angle here is equal to this angle plus this angle. So I have a tendency to bend them too far. You don't want to end up with a W shape. You remember that movie, It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World, from way back when? Where they were all looking for the big W. I don't know why that memory sticks with me. That was 60s, 70s movie? Not sure. Okay, so we wanted these guys to be touching along the whole length nicely, so I'm going to do a little fine tuning and then we'll solder those together. If you've never been to my channel before, there's a few things that I do different than some. I use hard silver solder for virtually everything, and I use sheet hard silver solder like this, and then I use a liquid flux called My-T-Flux that I spray on with a spray bottle. And I'm going to cut myself some of these pieces of solder. So I want enough solder on here to where when it does flow up and down that seam, I want when I polish it up not to be able to see that line at all. So we'll make sure we put plenty of solder on there. But one other thing to talk about this style of ring maybe is if you're using a propane torch or one of those little butane torches, when you have silver spread out this much as it is in this, if you're trying to get this to get hot enough to where that solder runs that whole seam on both sides, you may have trouble if you focus too much on one side or too much on the other. So you really need to move it back and forth along the whole thing and bring the entire piece up to the soldering melting temperature. If you stop and focus too much on one side and let this side continue to cool off, it'll prevent this side from getting hot enough. So it's constantly moving that heat back and forth along the whole length. Big problem that people make is they just focus kind of from the center. They don't go all the way to the ends of these things. So if you're having trouble getting your solder to flow, turn up your torch and heat the entire thing until it starts to really get hot enough. When you get it almost to the point where the solder is starting to curl a little bit, then you can stop and focus on one side to bump it up over the melting temperature. Then do some more over the whole thing, and then stop and focus on this side if you need to. So, all right, let's flux this and place some solder. Like I said, heat on the whole thing here. This is a much hotter torch than a propane torch, so it's not going to take near as long as it will on a smaller torch. good. Good seam penetration. Now, I may need to spread this open or squeeze it together in order to get this in there, but if I do, I need to spread it open just a skosh, so if I do this and push it just a little bit like that, my pliers should be able to drop it in there. However, I'd like it to be snug, so I spread it open just a little too far, so I push it back together again to get it in there tight. Like that. We want it to be flat at the bottom of this, so make sure your wires are nice and flat. Now I'm going to do something that is a little bit more advanced than a lot of people will have the skills if you're a beginner. It's called pick soldering, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of solder on the pick, heat this up to the soldering temperature, and pick it in here. And then I'll do it on the other side as well, so it's connected in those two spots. You can lean a little piece of solder in there if you'd like, that works too. I just find pick soldering to be pretty easy. So it's also one of those things that will really improve your skills soldering. So if you're interested, check it out. I'll leave a video link up there for you. Still got some solder here. So let's flux this and solder that in. The trick to pick soldering is getting it up to the temperature before you stick the little ball of solder that's on the end of the stick in there. You can watch the other solder joints when they start to reflow. You know you're there. And you start to get shiny and liquidy looking. You know, okay? That one. There's another one. That's attached. Okay, so if I'm going to do a little zigzag or something, should I use 20 gauge or should I use 18 gauge? I'm going to use 18, it's just a little bit thicker. There's a random piece laying around. Okay. So I'm thinking let's butt one end of it here, zig it this way, and then zig it back that way. And maybe, if you can see this, maybe make a mark right here where it meets. So we can get it to bend back the other way. So we'll cut it off right there. Alright. So again, you could place little tiny pieces of solder here, 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 and here, but I'm going to pick little tiny pieces of solder because I'm so used to doing that. So either way would work though. But you got to get the entire thing hot again in order to do this. So let's remember not to focus just in that spot. Okay, the last step on this one before pickling and polishing and setting your stone would be to make it into a ring shape. So I'm going to bend it this. You can use one of those mandrels that has a flat side if you want to. Like this kind of. It'll help keep you from distorting your bezel too much if you prefer. If it does distort a little bit, I can just reshape it once we have this round. That's no big deal. So, either way, I usually, near the bottom of the mandrel here, cross them over. Like that. Take it as far down as they'll go. Then I'm just going to slide it up to the size I want it to be. Say I want to make a 7. Okay, let's do 7.5. Then, if I make a mark straight across both of these, cut it right on that mark. That'll get me pretty close to the size that I want. And if I just push them past a little bit, pull back to where they meet, let them pop into place. Then I have some forward pressure so they won't pull apart when I'm heating them. You can solder these however you want. A lot of times I will cut a skinny long piece like this, and then I will curve it around my needle nose pliers like that. In order that I may be able to drape it over that spot. The only issue with soldering stuff like this is I used hard silver solder on all of these, so I need to get this almost to the soldering temperature along the whole thing and then bump it up over the soldering temperature down here at the very end so that it flows without reflowing those other ones. We're getting in there. It's got to be touching both sides. And let's bring it almost to the soldering temperature, and then I'll focus on the bottom. Now I can let that pickle, and then I'll clean it up. For the second one, we're going to start with 2 pieces of round 14 gauge wire. I think I'm going to use this time. Here's some 14 gauge. And again, I'm going to cut it a little bit longer than I need, probably 3.5 inches maybe, or whatever. 90 millimeters was what we decided, right? Okay, we'll get these prepped the same way we did before. Alright, don't need to find the middle on this one, since we're going to have it split on either end of the wire. Before we solder it together in the middle, we need to bend these out so that the solder doesn't flow all the way along there and go all the way to the end. And so we need to spread them open like this, and we need to decide how far in we want to go. We have plenty of room, so I'm going to give myself lots of room to work with. I can always cut it shorter if I want to. Let's go, I don't know, 15 millimeters. Just like before, if I want them to be exactly the same on either side, I just have to flip it around, line up the ends. And we're going to do what we did before, is we're going to solder these two together now. It's just the solder is going to be in the middle instead of on the ends. Oops. You can do either round or square wire with any of these, I think. I think that's probably enough solder. I think the square looks a little nicer, but because it's got that tendency to twist and stuff on you, it's a little more challenging to get it straight. Round wire looks like two round wires soldered together, so the other one looks like a solid piece that kind of splits when they're done. I'm going all the way to the ends here, even though there's no solder there. So those will act as little radiators if you don't get them hot, bleeding off heat. Okay. So we got a nice seam all the way down there, looks like. Okay, now this ring is going to be huge, so I'm not going to curve it the way that it's eventually going to be. I do, however, want these ends to kind of be curving inwards along the mandrel. So if you want, just pick a spot on the mandrel and kind of curve them inwards like this a little bit. Okay, so this is going to go between here, and I want these to kind of, I want these to angle upwards into it like that. I don't want them to be straight into the side like this and then curve down, because when you go to round it out, it'll really distort the bezel if you pull it that way. So I want them to actually meet at a slight angle. So I'm going to play with the angles of these a little bit. So kind of pointing upwards. Like that. And then I'm going to think about how I want these configured. You can get all sorts of crazy with this if you want to. You could like spiral one around and connect it to this, and then just connect one to either side, or you could just connect. I'm just going to do a simple one here. So I don't think they need to be quite this long though, so I'm going to cut them off a little bit. Like I said, I'm just going to kind of make these ones curl inwards. Like this. So I can kind of get the idea how this is going to look if I do that. But I need to get these shaped a little better, and I need to get them, the sides of the bezel here are vertical, and right now these ends are kind of like this. I hope you can see that on the camera. So I need to file them straight up and down, and then at an angle a little bit to match the curve of the bezel too. So inwards like that just a little bit. I want these pushing together enough to where that's going to be tight in there. The whole thing. The trick on this is that you want to make sure there's a lot more mass in the band than there is that little bezel, so heat the whole band on the bottom, because if you don't, it's going to cause problems. Again, this is one of those situations where pick soldering would help a lot if you want to try it. This would be a good time to do it. You could also pre-melt some solder on the sides of the bezel. That might work, and then just position these wires so they're pushing against it and then heat the whole thing till it flows again. That would probably work as well. I'm trying not to put too much pressure on these bands up here. Get these guys pushing together a little bit. Okay, same issue with this one as with the other one. If you get it too hot, that could drop out. So I'm going to heat it almost to the soldering temperature and then focus where I put the solder down here. So I'm going to pickle that and reshape it, and we'll get it all polished and set the stone for you, show you the final result. But that's basically how you do those. And like I said, you could configure the tops of these wires to connect to the bezel in all sorts of different ways. The only thing is you always want them to connect near the bottom. So our final one's going to be a bypass ring, and so let's see. If it's going to go, let's decide on the size for this one first. Let me find some scratch paper. If we're doing this kind, it's actually going to have to be a little bit longer than just meeting up against the bezel to get the size right. So I'm going to add a little bit beyond where they meet. So let's say we're making let's make a size. Let's do a 7. So instead of marking it where they just come together there, I'm going to wrap it around a 7 here and go past each other a little ways. I usually err on the side of too much, and then because I can always cut it shorter. Where'd my pencil go? There you are. So I'm still wrapped around a 7, but that would be where they meet. So if so maybe 3/4 of an inch or 2 centimeters, somewhere in there. Those ends are relatively flat. Now if we're going to do this kind of a sharp angle like that, maybe there's our bezel, so let's mark it about right there, and then let's measure that and do the same distance in from the other side. I'll make a sharp bend and half round wire against the way that it likes to bend. Sometimes I'll hold it flat against the table and grab it with my flat nose pliers like that. Then try and keep it from twisting on you. And do the same thing on this side. At this stage, what I really want to do is make sure that these two are lined up pretty nicely, same level and everything. That's pretty good. I think this one's sticking out a little bit longer than this one is, so I may change that a little bit. Position it kind of the same way that I did with this other one, so that nothing can fall off. But before I do, I want to look at it from the side, from this side, look at it from the top, make sure everything is positioned how you want it to be, because once it solders, you want it to be how you positioned it. You don't want it to have shifted on you. Same goes with the mass of the band on this one that's down below. You want to make sure that Oops, I lost my ball. I lost my solder ball. So I'm going to let that pickle, and then I'll probably round these ends off a little bit, and I'll reshape it into the shape it needs to be, and then we'll set the stone. So that's number 3. I'll show you the final result in a bit. So I've got these all finished up. Here's the first one with kind of zigzag decorations on either side with Kingman turquoise. It came out pretty good. This is the second one with a larimar. That's kind of what I was shooting for. And then finally we got the little aquamarine that's really pale. You can barely tell it's blue on this one, but that's the basic idea. I was gonna make this one smaller and then I forgot to cut it back, so I just left it a bigger size. That's okay. One of the things I found is that when you're selling rings, people who have larger fingers or very small fingers are very appreciative when they find that you have a larger size ring in there, and oftentimes that'll drive a sale. So, yeah. So I got a little bit of a big ring. Alright, I'll take better pictures and put those at the end of the video. Well, that was the 3 single stone cabochon beginner rings. I hope you liked those. And I hope you see how many different variations you could do with those. There's a lot of variety there that's possible. If you did like this content, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. That really is helpful. And leave me a comment. Tell me what you thought. The other thing is, don't forget to check out the video description down below if you want to become a more serious supporter of my channel. There are links to some important sites for me. There's a merch store where you can get one of those nice design idea books. And also there's a new one up that has the pickle time motif on the front of it because somebody asked for that. There's also a buy me a coffee link, which, like I said, helps me with supplies and stuff. And there's a link to my website where you can buy jewelry that I've made. And there's a link to my Patreon, so check that out if you're interested in becoming more involved. So thank you again for watching. Take care. Happy silversmithing.